Adams is calling on city council members to take a ride along with the NYPD.
He wants members to see firsthand why he vetoed a controversial bill requiring officers to document every stop they make, even minor ones. CBS 2's Lisa Rosner has city council reaction.
Goldie, you can come around and watch the roll in.
Friday called the How Many Stops Act that he says would have required extraneous documentation for every kind of police stop, including level 1 stops, which include basic conversations with the public.
Drowning officers in unnecessary paperwork when they should be out on the street keeping us safe. The bill would leave taxpayers with tens of millions of dollars in NYPD overtime each year. And it could be intrusive to guess the ethnicity, the age, to write down why you stopped someone in the first place.
Public advocate Jumani Williams disagrees.
Even the language of using the apparent gender and race comes directly from the patrol guy. And so the notion that this is overly burdensome, continue to use the word paperwork when there's no paper involved at all, is just verifiably a massive exaggeration. Whatever the administration believes the level 1 stop is right now, without this bill, they're supposed to tag it on the body-worn cameras at the end of their shift. So the question is, are they doing it now or not? If they're not, they have a lot of explaining to do.
The mayor Sunday called on every city council member to join the NYPD next week for a ride-along to see how the bill would be enacted. A rep for New York City Council says the mayor's comments are misleading, saying, quote, Mayor Adams' administration continues to ignore the fact that level 1 investigative stops often include instances when officers are asking someone where they are going or for their identification absent criminal suspicion. Supporters of the bill say it would prevent the return of biased stop and frisk policing. Council leaders are vowing to override the mayor's veto. In the newsroom, Lisa Rosner, CBS 2 News.
Welcome to the Gilchrist experience. That sounds awful familiar. It sounds like stop and frisk trying to come back. Victor, you're the man of the hour. I'm sure you helped fight this. Understand that the bill was passed and it was overwritten.
Two.
Two?
Two. That is one of the two that was overridden. Of course, while they were having discussion about that particular bill, the city council was also talking about Intro 549A, which was a bill sponsored by the Public Advocate's Office in conjunction with us advocates to end solitary confinement on Rikers Island, who Mayor Adams claimed did not exist. And we all know that is...
Say that again?
Mayor Adams claimed that solitary confinement did not exist on Rikers Island, which we all know...
Is this the same Adams that we're talking about?
The same Adams.
Said that
solitary confinement did not exist on Rikers Island.
How is that possible?
That's what he said. Of course.
Graham, you hear this?
Yeah, I heard.
Of course, we know that's a blatant lie, and you know I'm here to give personal testimony because I go to Rikers Island every month, and one of the units that we went to was they say punitive segregative unit, which basically is solitary under another name. And this is Mayor Adams' modus operandi. He always uses other names when he's masking what the true intention and what the true substance of that particular bill. Perfect example when they talk about how many stops. Stop and frisk all over again under another name. However, because we did such intense work with the city council, with Mayor, with Public Advocate Jumani Williams, they promised us that if the mayor vetoed that bill, and I'm talking 549A because that's the bill I represented, and if he vetoed it, that they would override his veto. And they said the same thing about how many stops.
Explain this bill that you're talking about.
So we're talking about Intro 549A, which is a bill to not allow them to place people in solitary confinement, which basically means 23 hours a day locked down in a cell by themselves. And as a result of Intro 549 being overridden, now they can no longer place people in whatever they call it, segregated confinement, punitive segregation, shoe, the whole is all one and the same. Now They can no longer do that. What has to happen is that there is an alternative means and mechanism that they need to use if they have to separate people from the general population for disciplinary issues.
Now, I'm going to bring up one of the most dramatic situations of solitary confinement. I want you to run item 1. This is Khalif Browder, a 16-year-old that was out for his first night out. His mother let him go out on a Friday night. He's 16 years old. He was supposed to have been home at a certain hour. I think he was on time getting home, but he was stopped because he was accused of stealing a backpack 2 weeks prior to that. And as a result, he was put on Rikers Island, and he spent something like 300 days in solitary confinement.
2 years.
2 years in solitary confinement.
That's right.
Now, this is what solitary confinement can do to you.
In May of 2010, 16-year-old Khalif Browder was walking home from a party with a friend when he was stopped by police. An officer said a man had accused them of stealing his backpack.
They came out the police car and they searched us, but we didn't have anything on us. So I was thinking the next step was we're free to go. We're just gonna walk home.
A high school sophomore like millions of others in America with a love for basketball and professional wrestling. Khalif was arrested and charged with robbery.
They set my bail for $3,500. You know, my mom told me she didn't have the money, and it was true. She didn't have the money. $3,500 was a lot for my mom.
He was taken to one of the toughest jails in the country, Rikers Island, where he would spend the next 3 years for a crime he says he didn't commit, without ever going to trial.
The only thing on my mind was I gotta go home. I didn't do this. Now I'm in jail around these grown men, and they're fighting each other, and I don't know. It was like hell on earth. We were beaten. We were beaten, stomped by the correction officers, hit with weapons. They tackled me in my cell where there wasn't any cameras. They grabbed me up, they put me on the bed, and they were just punching, they kicking me. And then they maced me in my eyes, they maced me in my nose and my mouth. I couldn't breathe.
3 years of alleged beatings, gang violence, and over 900 days in solitary confinement, all while he waited for a court date that never came.
It was just, we're not ready for trial, we're not ready for trial. And every single court date, I always had it on my mind, I'm going home this court date, I'm going home this court date. The judge told me if I plead guilty, I would release from jail that same day. But I didn't do it. You're not gonna make me say I did something just so I could go home. If I gotta stay here 5 more months just to prove that I'm innocent, then so be it. It's just heartbreaking, and it's like, I felt like they were just playing with my life.
In June of 2013, all charges against Khalif were dropped, and he was released from jail. But by then, he'd missed his junior year in high school, his senior year, proms, graduation.
I lost my childhood. I lost my happiness. I don't really tell too much people about this, but it's like, sometimes I talk to myself, and it's like, it's actually embarrassing. Sometimes on the train or the bus, I have a whole conversation with myself for 5 to 10 minutes, and then it's like, you're really crazy. Like, you really talk to yourself. But being in solitary confinement that long without talking to anybody, I feel like that maybe had something to do with it, because that's where those habits started to pick up. You know, deep down, I'm a mess, because it's like, I'm 21, and in the inside, I feel like I'm 40. I always believed in standing up for what I felt was right. And if I would have just been guilty, then my story would have never been heard. Nobody would have took the time to listen to me. I'd have been just another criminal.
Here you see the trauma of solitary confinement. Now, I happened to do several shows on this, and we met the mother, and she was a complete loving individual, and we introduced the brother too. And this is a story of a lot of young black people taking plea bargains. And tell us about it, Victor. Tell us how how much we have to fight this.
Well, of course, you know, this is a never-ending battle, and the Halt Solitary Confinement Coalition, which is the coalition I work for, you know, we advocated for 8 years on the state level, and in 2021 we were successful in getting the Halt Solitary Confinement bill passed in the state. What that basically meant that they could no longer hold people in indefinite solitary confinement, because solitary confinement in New York, there was never a bill that says there is a limit to the amount of time that people can be held in solitary confinement, which means you can be in solitary confinement for 10, 15, 20, 25, 30, 40, and 50 years. I was in solitary confinement for maybe 2 years intermittently. The longest time I spent...
How many times at one time?
Well,
How
the
long?
longest time I spent was 90 days. That was the consecutively.
And what did it do to you mentally?
I was never the same afterwards, and I'm never the same now. But I'm saying is that you could... People oftentimes have they misconstrue...
Do you still talk to yourself?
Yes, I do. They misconstrue solitary confinement and why people go there. They figure you're the worst of the worst, the baddest of the bad. That's not the case. You can go, especially upstate, because when you are upstate, you are in Ku Klux Klan land. Most of those maximum security prisons have very little, if no, colored people, because I don't know, I can't say black, because when you see them and how they act, you would never be calling them black people, work in these maximum security jails. So you're at the mercy of these Klansmen. And this is one of the things that we all get caught up under. They discourage you looking correctional officers in the face. However, society says, look a man or woman in their face when you talk to them. They discourage this. What they call that? Eyeballing. You get put in solitary confinement for eyeballing. So you can go in there just for eyeballing. Doesn't mean you did anything bad, contraband, fight, weapons, none of that. You can go in there for eyeballing. Long story short, I went to solitary confinement for having too many sheets in my cell. What they said, eventually when I went to the disciplinary board, and they made it appear as though I was going to tie 20 or 30 bed sheets together, throw them over a 40-foot wall in Attica. I was in Attica at the time. Ooh. They had no black people in the town. And they made it appear as though my intentions with having these sheets was to attempt an escape. Throw it over the wall, 40-foot wall. First of all, I have to get out my cell, I was in a maximum security prison. Get out my cell, get out the cell block, barbed wire, razor wire fence that's around the housing unit, somehow, you know, go undetected up to this 40-foot wall and throw it over the wall and climb myself to freedom. They didn't have no black people up in Attica when I was there. I had a green uniform, and they tried to make it seem like that was my intention. I got 90 days for that. All throughout my incarcerations, because I was the type of person that spoke up and spoke out against the injustices, I was labeled a rebel rouser. I went to solitary confinement for that. So all of my stints that I went to solitary confinement was not because it was a disciplinary issue. It was because I stood up and I spoke out against the establishment and the injustices I've seen. So we got that bill passed in 2021 that now in New York State prisons and jails, they can no longer keep people in solitary beyond 15 days. And I'm going to say this about the 15 days because, of course, we always head towards abolishment. But we took the 15 days because the UN rapporteur, Juan Mendez at the time, said that anybody held in solitary confinement beyond 15 days is considered torture. So we capped it at 15, and we came up with an alternative to people being placed in long-term solitary confinement. So you've become
successful about eliminating?
Yes.
Well,
in the state.
Round of applause.
So, and here's the funny part about this, Winston, is that our bill not only included state prison, but also jails. And this was really had me miffed, is that Rikers Island is considered a local jail. How come we had to now go and get a local bill passed on the local level to end solitary confinement on Rikers Island when the bill in the state legislature says state prisons and local jails? That part didn't really, I don't understand, but we got it passed, and now we have it passed on Rikers Island. So we also know that that happens in the federal system. So now we also have a bill pending in the federal system to end solitary confinement. This is a never-ending fight.
Graham, any comments about solitary confinement?
Well, even Amnesty International said that solitary confinement was torture. And we had a woman on the show a few years ago, if you'll remember. She said she committed a crime, she went to state prison, and she came out mentally defective because of them placing her in solitary confinement for an extended period of time. The jails in this, I should say the jails and the prisons in this country are not doing anything to help reform people, but to maintain a system of recidivism. Khalif Browder, that case especially shows how a young boy, not a man,
15.
a boy in school, wound up losing his mind because of the corruption and the ineptitude of the criminal justice system. You have cops that want to make an arrest, whether it's for overtime or to get some kind of credit. You have assistant DAs that don't really care. Khalif's case was brought to court over 30 times. 30 times.
30 times.
We are entitled to fair and timely hearings and trials. That did not happen for Khalif Browder. Over 30 times, the district attorney was not ready to present that case. That was DA Johnson. And I believe the ADA on that case is the current district attorney. So it took over, I think, close to 3 years before he was released. Why wasn't he released? What type of identification process went on that he was scooped up, taken to Rikers Island on a case that the DA could not even prove? And you have a judge that went along with this insanity, and subsequently what happens? He's hanging from his bedroom window, his feet kicking the kitchen door, and his mother goes upstairs to speak to him, and she finds the son hanging at the end of a rope.
Committed suicide.
This is not in any way acceptable in this or any other country. And the identification process, I've seen cops try to railroad people with a bad identification process. And I had an incident with a superior concerning the retention of a young man whose photograph had already been viewed by the victim and the witnesses, and none of them picked his photograph up. But he insisted on going to this boy's house in the Bronx, bringing him down to Brooklyn, and putting him in another line. And the detective that had the case, I informed her in our computer system that they had already seen this boy's photo and the photo of another fellow who looked like his identical twin who lived in Brooklyn. Two boys with identical features. She thought it was the same boy. It was a twin, not even related. So the sergeant and I got into it, and I gave her all the documents and put them in a sealed envelope because he was threatening to bring her up on charges if she didn't put the boy in a lineup. And she released the boy and sent him home with his mother around 2 o'clock in the morning. The mother took the train down to Brooklyn and was waiting out in the cold, and the sergeant knew it. He didn't even allow the mother to come into the command. I went out and got her from the cold and brought her in and gave her some hot coffee. But these are the kind of things that go on, and this is why we have to have people that have the right heart and mind to come into the departments in all these places and to take these jobs. We can't just sit on the outside complaining about what's going on. We have to go in and make the changes as necessary and take positions of authority within these agencies.
Thank you, Graham. Let's go to item 4. I want to talk a little bit about the 21st century and the biggest lie of the 21st century, 9/11. We have a second responder here. He's a member of NAN, and we welcome to the family.
Thank you.
All right. We'll run that item 4 and we'll be right back at you. Now this video didn't come out until the following day.
No, we don't need to see this guy.
Wall Street actually was the second tallest building in downtown Manhattan, and it was actually, before the World Trade Center, was the tallest. And then when they built the World Trade Center, it became known as the second tallest, and now it's the tallest.
I watched as people jumped, and I watched the second plane come in parts of New Jersey, Jersey City, but parts of New Jersey. I saw people getting together and in fairly large numbers celebrating as the World Trade Center was coming down. I watched our police and our firemen down in 7-Eleven, down the World Trade Center right after it came down. Everyone who helped clear the rubble. And I was there, and I watched, and I helped a little bit.
Now watch this one. Very complicated to see what happened and talk about 9/11, especially this, to tell people that 7/11, you know, it was an inside job. That's a controversy that, well, Graham will testify to, to this, right? Graham? You actually went down and investigated this scene? Tell us about your experience at 9/11. And then we have a second responder that came in and dealt with the aftermath, cleaning up the mess that was created on purpose. 9/11 was an inside job. All right? Graham?
You cannot. I was at Ground Zero working on a private contract. I saw crushed fire trucks which had stashed volumes of clothing, labels still on them, tags from, I think it was the Gap and other stores. The firemen had stolen these articles and put them in their trucks. And the truck was crushed maybe to a height of about 5 feet. There aren't many fire trucks that are 5 to 6 feet tall. And the clothing was sticking out of the trucks, crushed. At One World Financial Center, the Canadian Imperial Bank of Commerce was located. They had the international trading floors in that building. They had 40 stories. And the heroes went in and stole everything they could find in those buildings, in that building. PDAs, laptops, and they even left some of their equipment because they couldn't carry the stolen goods and their equipment at the same time. I was working on a contract with BDA and Associates, Bo Dietl. They had called me in to supervise the operation of that building on the night shift, and I had about 20 guys with me. So we saw and we knew that a lot of these guys were thieves. And we were brought in to seal the building because the Canadian Imperial Bank of Commerce had trillions of dollars of bearer bonds scattered on the trading floor. And if you know anything about finance, the owner of a bearer bond is the owner.
Anybody,
The person who physically holds that bill, that bond,
free
is
money,
the owner.
free money.
Definitely. And those bonds were in the billions and billions of dollars. There were thousands of those bills scattered across the trading floor. But the heroes, in their ignorance, were picking up minuscule items when the treasury was under their feet.
They didn't know what they had.
An NSA agent who was brought to me by a minister at my old church. And he informed me of the events that were coming, and that was in 1999. So there's no way in the world you can hijack a plane in the United States and fly from Boston to New York and not be intercepted by the United States Air Force. No way in the world. No way in the world. There's no way that Langley Air Force Base would have not one jet on the tarmac on a day like this, but yet there were none at Langley Air Force Base, and their job is to protect the Mid-Atlantic corridor of the United States.
What was going on?
My mother, lastly, was in the Empire State Building in 1945 when a military aircraft crashed into the Empire State Building. Is the Empire State Building still standing? Yes, it is. No way in the world those buildings could fall following an impact by a jet airline. No way in the world. And the World Trade Center were larger and stronger than the Empire State Building to take the impact of a 747 with no problem. The damaged area, damaged. But the lower floors were not heated thermally, and there was no reason for them to collapse, especially in the pancake formation, which only comes through a detonation, an organized detonation of explosives around the ring of the building.
Well, we have a person here that actually volunteered to clean the mess up. And as a result, he has all sorts of, well, what do you think of this? You know, you're Russian and you're trying to be patriotic. You're fighting for the country. You're a volunteer.
First off, I'd like to say thank you for having me on your show. It's a great platform to let people know what it is that's going on in the world, the truth side of it. As far as my job is concerned, I worked at World Trade, in front of World Trade on Monday. And, went home. I just bought a house in suburbia, so I went home and cut my grass and everything else. And I happened to cut my finger. And I went to the hospital to get stitches. And my job there was to pull fiber optics in the floor, in a manhole. And when I got up the next morning, that Tuesday morning, I looked at my thumb and I said, you know what? I don't think I'm going down there because the walls moved when you go in the manhole. And the reason why the walls moved, we say, is because there are bugs in the wall, in the manholes. There's roaches, there's everything else that you can think of down there. So we turned around. I didn't go in, and next thing you know, you see the plane hit the building. And the plane hit the building and came down right where we were supposed to be working that day. So by the grace of God, I was saved, and 3 other people were saved as well for not going in, because we're working teams of 2. New York City was shut down on Wednesday, and the National Guard came in that Thursday morning and called to order my union. I won't get into the number of the union, but called for the electricians to re-pull the fiber optics in New York City so we can get the stock market back up. So when they say that there's other people
get the stock market back
that did it, it was my job in the company I worked for. We pulled the fiber optics. But the funny thing about it is that people didn't realize is that when you hook a manhole and you pull the cover, because the building imploded, the building didn't explode, the building imploded, and everything went underground. And under the streets, there's about 30, 40 feet of just desolate air, and there's water beneath it. So when we pulled it, all the debris and everything came back out, closed it down and put on our little mask, and we ran to the next spot. And this went on time after time. But before we went out that morning, there was a smart gentleman. He said to us, he says, fellas, we don't know what's out there. Even though the governor of New Jersey said, the air is clean, everything's fine, you feel all right. We filled out forms just in case, and we went on our duty. And as you said, yes, we did the patriotic thing, went out there, gun ho. I was a young boy at that time. Not that I'm an old man now, but I was a young boy at that time, and we ran out there and did what we thought needed to be done, to get the city back up And after a while, we started feeling, I was always been an athlete, and after a while, I started feeling a little sluggishness in my coaching ability and my running ability. And, I'm known for having a little bit of an asthma situation. And someone said, you were down at 9/11. Oh, you need to go down there, you need to go to the doctor and check and see. And lo and behold, when we went to the doctor, the doctor says, yeah, you have very damaged lungs. And that's because of your exposure to 9/11. And it bothers, to know that we we gave life and limb to go down there. I just want to backtrack on something. When I call myself a second responder, I give it to the police officers, the firemen that went in there. That's their job. But what bothers me, but what gives me a little sensitive feeling is that for the last 20-something odd years, we've heard about first responders, and how they went in and they did their patriotic duty. But there's the guys like myself, guys sitting next to me, just Joe Blow from the neighborhood, that we went out there and we worked and we did just exactly what it is that we needed to do. And year after year, even up until 2 weeks ago, I got a phone call. Someone said, hey, you remember such and such? I said, yeah. He said he died. He had pancreatic cancer due to 9/11. And me, myself, I've been certified in a few illnesses. I have chronic asthma, PTSD. PTSD.
What's that?
PTSD, I don't have the abbreviation for it.
Post-traumatic stress disorder.
Exactly. And how they come to that is the fact that I was there the day before and the fact that I was involved with it. But prior to that, what I suffered also, and not knowing, was I had a brother on Flight 103 over Lockerbie, Scotland, that was blown up. So everything intertwined with one another, whereas that trauma led to this trauma, which has led to me to where I am now. What kind of effects does it have on me? Everything. You get up every morning and you wonder, is this my last day? Will I get caught in a smoke-filled situation? Because I take a shot every 8 weeks that costs thousands and thousands and thousands of dollars. And if I don't get that shot, I'm not guaranteed that I'm going to live further than that shot. So mentally it plays a game. It's stressful that you have to live this way. I've always been a strong man, upstanding person. I had some traumas, some things that I did in my life, but as far as this thing here is concerned, as far as being a lie, the true part about it that I lived is that I was in that pit. I was in that manhole, and
you were lied to.
We definitely lied to. We were definitely lied to. Especially when, like I said again, when they said that the air is clean.
Yeah.
So we took it upon ourselves to say, hey, let's just get in there, just do our job.
With no protective gear.
None whatsoever. None whatsoever. Later on within the week's time, they had the dust mask and stuff like that there. But it wasn't N95, and you couldn't use N95s under that circumstance. You needed respirators. And like I said,
right.
You needed respirators. N95s did nothing for you.
Well, if you knew what you know now about, I wouldn't even think about going back down there.
If I knew then what I know now, would I do it? I hate to sound unpatriotic because my father was a Korean War vet.
Yeah.
And he was very patriotic. But
we all are.
I wouldn't do it. The stress that it pulled on my family.
If I can interject, we always have to use common sense when we're doing anything, and really think for ourselves and not trust basic information that's panned out. When I went down, I went to OSHA, and they were analyzing the air. I said, what do we have? They said human ash, human bone, concrete, asbestos, and they went down a list. And I said, suit me up. And I had a biohazard suit and I had a respirator. And my filters were changed every day. My car was hosed down.
Yeah.
There were guys sitting out in the air eating food. And I said to them, you guys are gonna get sick. They said, oh, they said the air is good. I
Yeah.
said, you have common sense. When was the last time you sat to eat a meal and you saw particles floating in the air around your food?
And you could smell it. You could smell it. It was a funny
Right.
smell.
And I told them, forget about what the government says, think for yourself, the air is not clean.
You could smell it.
So,
You know,
it's really sad. Really have to think. It's not about being patriotic. You can be as patriotic as you want, but you're not going to consider what is in front of you because the government doesn't really care.
no.
They don't.
Especially
And
for black
being
people.
being white or black doesn't protect you from some of the insidious things that go on in this country. But you know, maintain your health, stay on top of it, do what you have to do. But I always wore a biohazard suit and a fresh respirator every day that I went down. I wasn't down. As a matter of fact, Dr. D's, his son went down to work as a welder, and they told him they didn't need any help from people like him. They said, we take care of our own. So it was a blessing to him that they told him he couldn't work because he was black, basically. He was a welder. And he was saved from any health hazard. But even I was at the FBI headquarters in Manhattan, and they were down. And they had to relocate. And they were located at the Federal Plaza. And the ash and everything was covering the streets like snow, even up by Federal Plaza. That's how far up the dust and debris had drifted. So, you know.
Brother Graham, wasn't there a lady in government who said that there was no problem down there?
I think that was
Yeah, that was the former governor.
Jersey governor.
Christy Todd Whitman.
Okay.
Christy Todd Whitman. And they passed a bill stating that she could not be sued for her statements because they knew it was a lie. They knew that from the very beginning.
All right, you know, what I'm going to do is show how we as black people survive all these onslaughts. In particular, you know, all that goes wrong on the planet and our 400 years of slavery, and yet we strive and survive all this onslaught. And we're the most spiritual people on the planet. And I give you a reference to what keeps me going as a person like Martin Luther King. And I want to play something that inspires me, and every time I hear it, I understand that this man saw our future and saw how we live as people, how God puts us here for a purpose, to go through this and learn to love ourselves. A simple thing, love yourself before you can love anybody else. That's why I always say the God in me loves the God in you. Amen.
Amen.
Play item 4, right? I wanted to run Martin. Do you have that one available? Martin. It's labeled. I forgot the number. I make
forget.
mistakes every now and then.
You got to give yourself the gong stick for that.
Oh.
That's a gong stick
Hey.
moment.
See, Bev, I made a mistake.
You got a gong stick moment.
what is it about the Negro? I mean, every other group that came as an immigrant somehow, not easily, but somehow got around it. Is it just the fact that Negroes are black?
White America must see that no other ethnic group has been a slave on American soil. That is one thing that other immigrant groups haven't had to face. The other thing is that the color became a stigma. American society made the Negro's color a stigma. America freed the slaves in 1863 through the Emancipation Proclamation of Abraham Lincoln, but gave the slaves no land or nothing in reality, and as a matter of fact, to get started on. At the same time, America was giving away millions of acres of land in the West and the Midwest, which meant that there was a willingness to give the white peasants from Europe an economic base. And yet it refused to give its black peasants from Africa, who came here involuntarily in chains and had worked free for 244 years, any kind of economic base. And so emancipation for the Negro was really freedom to hunger. It was freedom to the winds and rains of heaven. It was freedom without food to eat or land to cultivate, and therefore it was freedom and famine at the same time. And when white Americans tell the Negro to lift himself by his own bootstraps, they don't look over the legacy of slavery and segregation. I believe we ought to do all we can and seek to lift ourselves by our own bootstraps, but it's a cruel jest to say to a bootless man that he ought to lift himself by his own bootstraps. And many Negroes, by the thousands and millions, have been left bootless as a result of all of these years of oppression and as a result of a society that deliberately made his color a stigma and something worthless and degrading.
Example of what's happening today. You know, immigrants come here and get a free pass out, and what's Adams going through and allowing bus loads of immigrants into New York, and he has to, by law, feed them and clothe them and house them. And the Texas governor is sending all these people to all the black mayors. Blatant racism. And what can we do about it? I locked the bus door and sent them home. Now, why aren't we protesting? Why are we letting this happen? And it's taking away from us. I mean, I'm all for immigration, but what about how we've been treated for the last 400 years? Where's our part?
You know, that's interesting. I'm just going to say this really quickly. When we talk about the plight of the black person and how people come from other countries, right, and get a foothold, right, in our communities, right, and somehow miraculously, economically able to raise their level in life while we continue to struggle. Over 400 years of slavery, I know that all is tied in. And for me, it's the fact that, you know, you got thousands and thousands of people, black folks, that have been living on the streets for years, couldn't get a decent place to stay, denied food stamps. And people come from another country and instantaneously they're given food stamps, they're given bank debit cards, and they got places to stay. Automatically you got all of this housing available to house all of these people, and opening up spaces and places that were vacant for years that was not being used, where they could have been utilizing affordable housing. It's an insult, and we should be outraged. Yeah, we do need a revolution. And I'm not talking about an armed revolution. I'm talking about a revolution of the mind and a revolution of the coming together of us as a people.
A revolution of love. A revolution of love. If we're going to bring
education, consciousness.
Well, Martin Luther King kicked butt with love.
But
All
we
right?
got, but we know
Now we know
gotta
it's
lift
in our
ourselves
nature
up.
to love anyway.
Yeah.
Through all the drama, we still can dance and sing and shout with all this garbage going on against us. I remember when Leroy and I were growing up in the 50s. It was nothing stopping us. I mean, there was nothing we couldn't do. And you see it at NAN. Some of your parents coming to NAN, National Action Network. There's a place where you got to disciple Martin Luther King in my book, in my church, National Action Network. I got Martin Luther King on the wall. That's my Christ-like figure.
Right.
You know, he said we're going to reach the promised land.
That's right.
And when Obama was president, it was the promised land for me. I mean, oh, whoa. I said, whoa, how can we not go right? And then you had all these black people didn't like him because he wasn't black enough. And I said, that's crazy. Look how we think as black people.
We're programmed.
We're kind of warped because being black can drive you crazy. The stress, and being a black woman is even tougher. You got to raise these humans that you come from. You're the human God, the female, and look what you've had to go through for 400 years, mothering all these people. But you've got the spiritual nature, you're the human God, and you produce a life, and you got to love it and teach it how to be human. And that covers all races. You're not going to leave anybody out. You have to learn to be a decent human being, judging a person by the content of their character, not by the color of their skin. That goes in particularly, you know, because we con each other worse than anybody else.
Yeah, for sure.
We're our own worst enemy. The last person who cheated me and made a fool out of me was black. And look at the black people coming here now. They look at you and say, you're a fool. They look at you, how come you don't take advantage of all this stuff they're giving away?
Sometimes you're not allowed. Just to interject. I know a young woman, hard-working woman. She made a certain amount of money, got laid off. She went down to social service, and they said, well, we need your paperwork to see how much you've made. They also actually said, you have a 401k. Right? And she was naive enough, didn't know, what you should say and what you shouldn't say.
Yeah.
And she made $5. $5 too much? And they said, you're not able to get social service, food stamps, none of that stuff. So they put you in a bind where if you make too much, economically, if you make too much, you're not suitable for. So what do we have to be, the downtrodden? Or be, it's just, you're put in a bad situation, because there are good people out there that want to do the right thing.
But they always do things to deny us the American dream. And then they bring in foreigners and treat them better than they treat us, because they're not going to complain like we've got things to complain about. That's what we have to understand. The con that's being placed on us. I mean, you got the youngsters calling each other niggers and proud of it. You saw the example of that. It was a joke. This young man,
they call one another nigger, but they don't call one another black. Black is, in the presentation that Reverend Martin Luther King just had, he talked about black having been made a stigma. There's a lot of analysis that we have to do. We see things, but we don't go into the why of things. This is a system. The system is one of oppression, and it starts with the mind. It hits you in the head and hit you in the mind. Nigger has to be broken down to a child, to a classroom, what it means. We don't even know. When I say we don't even know, I've looked it up. The point is, we don't know what it means. We don't know the origin of it. We don't know the contempt that's built into it. The animalization that is connected with nigger. It's not even a human. The way So I'm putting that over to the side. Solitary confinement. The boy is picked up because they say he looked like somebody. He fits the description. That goes back to the time right after enslavement, formal enslavement, where they have the black codes. If you was on the street talking, three of us were talking and we couldn't prove that we were working, they automatically put us in jail. My recommendation is for some of us, if not all of us, read the book Slavery by Another Name. Because you can't look at the present and not go to the root. We got to go to the root of things. That may not mean all of us, but we have to analyze. Just like Whitman gave the okay to go and work on the pile. And then they passed the law, as Brother Graham said, they passed the law that she couldn't be sued. We didn't know that.
She was set up.
That was one of those laws. So the point is that one of the other points is, what does it mean? What does it mean for us to have survived the stuff that they've put on us, and that they have a system to reinforce it? You have to look at that. What does that mean? What I'm talking about, if you had an automobile and there are a number of cars that crashed on the road and yours come out with a scratch, you would look at it and say, what's happening with this car? It may be more valuable than what I thought it was. That's the kind of analysis that we have to do. All of us. I'm not in our first line. Last thing, we vote for assembly person, state senator, the council. Most of the voting that we do is not because we like somebody, but because there is a problem involved. And there we vote for this person and putting them as the first line of defense. So when we see other people coming here and getting what we in $5 difference, and all of us have that story. $5 different, $5 above the level, $3 above the level, $20 above the level. And you come up with the children that you're gonna feed. And your own people are behind that desk because it's a game on top of the system. It's a game they be running. And we're in the inside of the game, but don't tell us, except we tell little Maria, our niece, here's what you gotta do, here's the time of day you gotta go, because they got a quota.
That's what we try to do here every week. We try to get the truth out, and sometimes we do a good job. Most of the time we do a good job, but there's so much out here. Now, how do we get Biden reelected? Anybody that doesn't want to vote for Biden, I think something's wrong with them.
Anybody who don't vote at all is something wrong with them.
I mean, why are we arguing about this? We got a fool running for president.
Man.
Everybody can see it. Yet we're arguing about who we're going to vote for? Whether we're going to see this guy is a con. He's a New York con. I've lived there long enough to see. I remember his first con, the Hyatt Hotel on 42nd Street. He game and played him so sweet. Everybody admired him because he got everybody else to spend their money, and he had the idea. That's a New York con. I mean, we all should be familiar with that, but the rest of the planet are not conditioned to being a New Yorker. Well, we get all kind of crazy people in New York. This is the head of this is the center of the universe, New York City.
Sure.
Everybody anywhere on the planet, we got one of those right here in New York City. More than one. From any place in the world. They're right here in New York City. Bet. You get on a subway car and you got a UN right there. You go down to 42nd Street and stand on the corner and you'll see anybody from the planet walking by. So we are conditioned to the universal world planet. And what's gotten us through all this thing is the God in us. the spiritual. We're the original people, black people. The people in the Bible are black. Jesus was black. He was an Ethiopian Hebrew. He was Jewish. Or Hebrew. The Philosopher. Somebody told me I look like Jesus. Because I look Ethiopian. Oh, look out. And named Gilchrist. Oh, man. I got baptized on Easter and I look for something to happen.
Right.
I believe in God. God's real for me. So I got to be careful when she shows up. See, my mother is God to me. I mean, whenever I've been in trouble, my mommy has always been there. My wife saw me crying in the living room, and I was thinking about my mother. She said, "What is wrong?" I said, "I just thought about the best part of me." The best part of me is my mother. I was wondering why I was so nice. I said, I'm half my mother. No wonder I'm such a softy and like people anyway. Because I'm supposed to. Because that creator, the creator of me, I have a DNA. So as a man, you know, when you're a tough guy, you know, it's kind of hard to love people, love anybody. But that's your nature. That's what you have to do. That's what got us here today. That's how we survive.
I feel that we have to, those of us who see the lesser of two evils, have to go about registering many of our younger people and giving them the message that needs to get to them to come out and vote. When Jesse Jackson ran, and no one can repeat that kind of energy except maybe Obama, but I'm not even dealing with him. The energy that was generated during the time when Jesse Jackson ran for president, everybody was, it was so much energy because they saw hope in the man that said, keep hope alive. Not that Biden can do that, but it's going to take a creative force to increase the number of votes that would come from our community.
And with that, the God in me loves the God in you, and stay tuned for more of the Gilchrist experience. And we clocked it out at 58. Oh, wow. I'm sorry I didn't get the chance to let you speak more, but you have to come back. That's all. Power to the people.
Amen.
It's a wrap. Thank you.
Hey, fellas.
Thank you, Brother Leroy. Appreciate it.
Winston.
Nah?
Winston. Ken Johnson